Hi, I'm Mariah Leroy, and I will be talking to you about this book, The Life and Diary of David Brainerd. It's edited by Jonathan Edwards with a biographical sketch of the life and work of Jonathan Edwards. It's put together by Philip E. Howard Jr., who edited it, obviously after Jonathan Edwards. Now, who was Philip Howard Jr.? I have some questions here, some points that I wrote down about Philip Howard Jr. He was associated with the Sunday School Times for nearly 30 years. I tried Googling him, but I didn't find too much information, but this information was on the back of the book, and so that gives some credibility there. He was heavily involved in church and with Sunday school. I think that gives him some credibility as to his editing. What he did with the book is he shortened excerpts from Jonathan Edwards' edited versions of David Brainerd's diary and journal. He only edited out parts that were rambling, not really rambling, but long. Because it's a journal and diary, it was it was like a daily thing, and so he would be doing this witnessing to the Indians day after day, and therefore he would just kind of cut out different parts of that so that the story would move along and you could kind of see the highlights of David's life. I kind of explained number 3 already. It was kind of long, but also Jonathan Edwards was already a prolific editor. He had already kind of shortened it a little bit. And David Brainerd was a great writer. The author, Philip Howard, was just making it a little bit shorter so that the rest of the public would possibly more readily read it, because it would be a little bit smaller and not quite so bulky. Why did he decide to edit this manuscript during his lifetime, and what did people in the period it was printed gain? David was born in 1898, and so that was right around the turn of the century. He lived all the way until the 1960s. He lived through World War I, Great Depression, and World War II, so he had a lot of stuff going on. It just went through a lot of troubles, and in the book, David has a lot of troubles. He actually ends up with tuberculosis, consumption. He has Indians that don't want to listen to him. He has people who persecute him for trying to witness. He goes through a lot, and so I think maybe David thought that we could relate to, I think that Philip thought that maybe we could relate to David a little bit, and so he made it a little bit smaller with his editing. Some people are more likely to pick up a slightly smaller book. Historically, I didn't find any historical things that were wrong with it, because it was a diary and journal, and it can apply to anybody. Basically, whatever you're going through, God is there, and you just keep on giving it to Him. Give your whole life to Him, and He is there. He is going to take care of you no matter what. David did end up dying of consumption, but through it all, he was giving glory to God, and it was just such a blessing to be able to read this book and learn how he kept positive, even in the pit. How did the author approach this book? The author thought it was necessary to have a thorough 41-page background of Jonathan Edwards, the first editor of David Brainerd's work, in order to first understand the book. Jonathan Edwards was an amazing preacher. I've read some of his sermons. I really like his stuff. And so I think it was important to understand his background, his story a little bit, how he became a pastor and was preaching, and because he was the first editor. And so if you know a little bit about the author, you know a little about the editor, then you kind of understand what parts they're editing out and how they change it. I don't think they actually changed David Brainerd's words, but they did just take sections out. As shown in number 2, how it's shown, they were trying to show an overview of David Brainerd's entire life, and therefore they left chunks of the history out to move it forward. I think that Jonathan took some of those chunks out, but Philip Howard did even more than that. He took more out to make it more concise so that you could really see the major points in David's life as it goes through the book. The third thing is the author didn't think that the diary and the journal were more important. Like one was more important than the other. He put as much as he could of one and the other. They're about equal. And so one was not more important than the other. Some difficulties with the books and how I would fix it. I only found 2. The first one really cannot be avoided. It was written by 3 people. It says 3 people wrote or edited this book, and each of their styles is uniquely different. One is very educated and mostly modern with large words. That would be Howard, who was born 150 or so years after these people, Jonathan Edwards and David Brainerd. So obviously the language is very different. And then the second person right here, one written in the 1700s English with the sort of writing that draws you in, Edwards. His writing is just very passionate. It really draws me in and makes it so I want to read it. And then with David Brainerd, it was very clearly written without the intention of it being shared. I don't think he would mind it being shared because it really showed how God worked in his life and how he was working in the lives of the Indians and those he was witnessing to. But yeah, it is a diary, so it was written very personally. It was just him pouring out his heart to God in a diary section. And so it was just kind of hard to go from one style of writing to the next, but it really cannot be avoided. The last difficulty, they had 147 pages of a depressed man in a row without a break. It was very difficult for someone of a very happy disposition. For me, I get very involved in my book and I get very attached to my character. And so when I was reading his diary and he was going, he was just telling about how depraved he was before God and how he didn't understand how he deserved what he was getting blessed with. And he would have like several days of depression, and then he would have like a couple of happy days, and then he would plunge back down into depression. So it was just kind of hard for me to read all in one sitting, and I had to read some and then get up and do something else to kind of get my mind off of what I had been really absorbed in and go back to reading it. The first difficulty, it really can't be changed because it's 3 people who wrote the book. But the second one, I think if I was to edit the book, I would actually line up the journal and the diary like how they are by the dates, and then I would like do a little bit of one and a little bit of another, like a week of his diary and then a week of his journal. That way you're not just reading about his feelings and emotions and how he feels before God. It's a very personal thing to be reading about. But yeah, it was just kind of hard for me to read all of that. But it was very good. I really enjoyed the book. I'm not sure if I'll read it again, just because it was hard for me to get through the first part. But I will probably read like part of the diary and then part of the journal and read it through again that way. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that you learned something through my PowerPoint and video, and I wish you the best in this class. Thank you.